Hi everyone, David Aragona here with the July 16th edition of Horses to Watch. So we take a look back at the first weekend of the Saratoga meet. And this is one of my favorite times of the year to do this Horses to Watch. So because there are so many trips to take a look at each week at Saratoga, it's tough to narrow it down to just three or four to talk about. What I try to do on this show is look for horses that are ones that you might want to bet back in the future. So there were plenty of impressive performances this week that I could have highlighted, horses that won or finished in the money, but I want to take a look at some horses that maybe finished a little bit further back in the pack, the types that are not going to attract a lot of attention the next time they run, even though they had some subtle or sometimes more obvious trips in their races, and might be horses that we can make some money with a little bit later in this Saratoga meet. So with that in mind, let's take a look at one race from opening day at Saratoga. This was Thursday, July 11th, the sixth race of the day. This is one of those auction maiden special weight races for horses that most recently sold or are in at auction for $50,000 or less. It's going 5.5 furlongs for the 2-year-old fillies. We'll break these runners from the gate and focus on the number 6, My Vanilla. And you can sort of see her on the right of the screen just there. She breaks a little bit slowly. I'm not going to show the head-on of this race, but she just gets sandwiched between rivals as the entire field converges coming out of the starting gate. So she gets squeezed back. But you can see after breaking slowly, her jockey Lane Luzzy is not content to have that position towards the back of the pack, and he allows her to rush up through the field. And I would say this is a typical premature move, because this is not the point in the race when you want to be expending all of this energy. But there she goes on the outside of horses to pass about half the field through the opening quarter mile of this race, running all the way up into fifth at the point on the turn where she's looking like she might ultimately challenge the leaders. She's going to flatten out a little bit towards the latter half of this race. You can see her getting spun a little wide coming off the far turn here. She's going to angle back inside for the stretch behind some kickback. And from here to the wire, she'll maintain her position. She's ultimately going to finish fifth in this race, but she's going to be no match for the top two finishers who really do spurt away from this field in the late stages. But this was a pretty quality maiden special weight race. The top two, they earned buyers of 77 and 76. Those are higher buyer speed figures than the winner of the Schuylerville received later in the day. So even though My Vanilla was beaten a long way, you can see her sort of fading across the wire there. I think she did some good things towards the middle portion of this race. Also, she was going out for trainer James Ryerson, who tends to give his horses a start when they make their debuts. They typically do improve second time out. And also, this filly might ultimately prefer a surface switch down the line because she's got plenty of turf pedigree on the dam side. Her dam raced exclusively on turf and synthetic, and she's a half sister to two multiple turf winners. So maybe one to check out when she shows up on turf next time, or even in a dirt race at a slightly lower level. She's one that could do better with a fair start and a more well-judged ride. Let's take a look at another race from early in the week. This was Friday, July 12th. It's the seventh race of the day at Saratoga. It's an optional claiming 35,000 starter allowance, the other condition, going a mile and a 16th on the inner turf course. Let's break these runners from the gate. We're going to focus on another number 6. This one, Addicted to You. And you can see this is a large field going the two turns on the turf. And Addicted to You breaks pretty well between horses and is going to go up towards the front end. But this is a race that features a pretty honest pace. And you can kind of see the number 1, Sinful Dancer, is a big long shot. He breaks alertly, and he's the kind of horse that wants to run off on the front end. And anybody that tries to go close to him early is just going to get dragged along into a pace that's a little bit unreasonable for the distance. And you can see that both the number 7, Mauritius, and the number 6, Addicted to You, are trying to chase that leader as the entire field starts to get strung out onto the backstretch. And this is a pace that really does just completely fall apart. The number 1 and number 7, who I just mentioned, they're ultimately going to finish 11th and 12th in this race, the second to last and last place positions. So I think you do want to give some extra credit to anybody who was close to the pace and hung around at the finish. And the only horse to do so was the number 6, Addicted to You. This is a race that is ultimately going to be won by a horse who comes from towards the back of the pack. The number 4, Classic Creation, wins this race, and he's actually going to be one of the last horses to turn into the stretch, fading or actually getting shuffled back to the 12th position around the far turn here. But focus on the number 6, Addicted to You, because he is going to move to the outside to the 3 path right here and move past those horses who are setting the pace. And the entire field is going to start to bunch up in mid-stretch here. And as the speeds start to fade away, it looks for a moment like Addicted to You is going to get swallowed up by the closers. But once his jockey Ricardo Santana gets into him here, he pretty gamely battles on between horses and is not going to let those closers who have built up so much more momentum than he has get away from him. And he's really battling on gamely between horses here. There's the number 4 who closed from about last at the top of the stretch to get up. But Addicted to You in the photo for third there. Thought this was a deceptively strong performance for a horse who really ran against the pace dynamics in this race from last Friday. And he's not the kind of horse that's going to take a whole lot of money when he runs back off this trip. He's 2 for 24 in his career. Those aren't the kinds of horses that attract a lot of wagering support. And he's had a couple of trips so far this year, even before this. His seasonal debut back at Aqueduct, he had some traffic coming out of the starting gate and a tough trip after that. So I think he's a horse that is a little dirtied up moving into his next race, likely coming towards the middle portion of this Saratoga meet. Let's now take a look at a couple races from the Saturday card at Saratoga, July 13th. The 8th race of the day was a maiden special weight event for 3 and up runners going 7 furlongs. This is your typical Saratoga maiden special weight on a Saturday that features plenty of horses who have already shown ability, some first-time starters with some nice workouts, and we're going to focus on a couple of lightly raced runners, the number 7 Commuted and the number 8 Ready as Ever. And we're going to see the 7 and 8 right next to each other. The 7 Commuted, you can see him kind of hop up right after we highlight him right here. And just seems like maybe he stumbled or stepped on himself or something went wrong at the start for that horse. The 8 Ready as Ever just breaks slowly. He was a first-time starter who was green and got a little bumped out of the starting gate by Commuted and just winds up towards the back of the pack. Ready as Ever, you could just see him starting to lose contact with the field. And I want to show this head-on replay of the backstretch because you can see how much kickback is hitting this horse into the face. He's not liking it, carrying his head a little high, and really having to be ridden to even maintain contact with the field. He's actually losing contact here. He's about 6 or 7 lengths behind the second to last horse. So Ready as Ever really struggling at this point in the race. Commuted has gotten back into position along the rail. He's naturally a closing type, but his jockey Brian Hernandez Jr. just rides him very conservatively from this point of the race on. And I wonder if something went wrong at the start for this horse, and maybe he just didn't feel like he really wanted to ask this horse for a full effort after that, because he really just never gets in gear. Ready as Ever, though, you can see him. He's way at the back of the pack behind horses, taking all of that kickback. That is him now furthest left on the screen at this point, trying to angle out. He's hanging on his left lead, just greenly trying to get around these horses. And he's actually going to finish okay to pass about half the field. Both of these horses are ones that I think you want to give a mulligan to for this race and maybe take a further look at them when they run back. They actually hit the wire right together there. Like I said, Commuted just didn't seem like today was really his day after that awkward beginning. And Ready as Ever, a first-time starter for Bill Mott, who just looked like he had no clue what was going on, racing behind horses, taking all that dirt in his face. He reportedly looked like a horse that was going to need a race based on the DRF Clocker report that is put out by my colleague Mike Welsh and his colleagues. And I just think Ready as Ever is one that is really going to appreciate more distance in the future, but probably just having this experience under his belt. He's got pedigree, being by more than Ready. His second dam is actually Breeders' Cup Distaff winner Agena. This horse is a half brother to Emboldened, who was grade 1 placed in the La Brea. That horse, Emboldened, was a good dirt sprinter. So I think Ready as Ever does have the potential to improve from this, just probably needed to get this race behind him starting off his career. Let's finish things off with one more race from that Saturday, July 13th card. This was the feature race of the day, race 10, the grade 1 Diana, going 1.125 miles on the inner turf course for the older fillies and mares. Let's break these runners from the gate. And I'm going to focus on a couple of horses that finished pretty far back in the pack. I believe they're actually the last and second to last place finishers in this race. The number 8, Nisi Marie, and the number 10, Chili Flag. But I'm highlighting these two horses because really nothing went right for them in this race. The pace is extremely slow. You can see that nobody wants to go out towards the front end, and the number 6, White Beam, just kind of finds herself there by default. She's a horse that does have natural tactical speed, but nobody wanted to press her in this race, and the way that they line up at the beginning of this race is pretty close to the way that they finish because there's not a whole lot of movement. This is your typical merry-go-round race where it's really hard for anybody to do any passing because they go so slowly through the opening stages, and they sprint home, and the sprint finishes of the leaders are just as fast as the horses that are in behind can run at their maximum speed, so nobody can really make up any ground. I want to highlight the number 8 and number 10 in particular because Nisi Marie, while she's up in the middle of the pack, she's ahead of about horses at this point in the race, she's wide and she has no cover. And in slow-paced races like this, the only possible path that horses have coming from off the pace is to save ground riding the rail. You see the number one Moira, who actually does best of the closers. She's got inside position around the clubhouse turn and the far turn, so she's able to make something happen at the end of this race. Not so for Nisi Marie, who is 3 wide around both turns, has no cover at any point in the race. So that's just going to spell disaster for her from a result standpoint. And then the number 10 Chili Flag, she's towards the back of the pack. She is just a deep closer. That's her natural running style, and she's never going to have any chance to make up ground in this race. You can see she swings out widest of all for the stretch drive here, is trying to unleash that sprint finish. But like I said, the leader, White Beam, also has a sprint finish because she got to rate through the opening stages, even though she was leading the race. And there's just not a whole lot of movement going on through the stretch of this race as they just run to the wire. The horses that were in the top 4 positions at the top of the stretch, they're going to finish that way, with Moira getting past one horse in that final 8th of a mile. So I really do think you want to be forgiving of the performances, especially of the number 8 Nisi Marie and the number 10 Chili Flag. Not exactly sure where they're going to line up in the future. There's talk of maybe Chili Flag coming back in a race like the Grade 1 4-star Dave later in the meet against the males. Cutting back to the mile, though, is probably going to be the best thing to happen to her, because horses that have that big late sprint finish like she does are typically better going slightly shorter distances. And I think even with that wide trip and coming into trying to close into the slow pace, the mile and an eighth distance might not have really worked for Chili Flag in this race. So I think both of these fillies are ones that you want to give another chance to when they come back for their next starts in stakes company. So those are all the horses to watch from this opening week at Saratoga. If you want to follow any of these horses or others moving forward, you can add them to your horse watch on DRF.com, and you'll get email notifications to your account when these horses run back in the future. You can also go to your DRF formulator or Timeform US PPs and enter the notes feature within the charts, putting in your own comments about these horses' trips. And those notes that you make will show up in the running lines for the past performances when these horses do run back in the future. Everybody, thanks for tuning in to Horses to Watch this week. I'll be back with another batch of replays to analyze next Tuesday.